In the last few months, this man has become one of our most listened to public figures. He's the U.S. Surgeon General, C. Everett Koop, and he has filled what was a leadership vacuum in the fight against AIDS, the disease which is now virtually tied with cancer as the American public's most serious health concern. Now, it's rare when a bureaucrat like Dr. Koop becomes so well known. And he is a rare commodity in Washington because he always appears to put principle ahead of politics. What motivates him? What is this doctor really like? Well, we asked ABC's medical editor, Dr. Timothy Johnson, to find out. And the result is a revealing conversation between our doctor and the nation's doctor.
Even though it was only 3 weeks ago in Milwaukee, it seemed like someone had turned back the clock. Soft violins and the 1920 song, Making Whoopee. Music and sentiment from a time when sex and death were not often linked in the same breath. But here was the man who seems to be always talking about what making whoopee can mean in the 1980s.
Finally, the second recipient for this evening, Dr. C. Everett Koop, Surgeon General of the United States.
St. Joseph's Hospital was honoring Dr. C. Everett Koop for his efforts against smoking, which is what people usually think of when they hear the word Surgeon General. Indeed, the Surgeon General is usually known for simply issuing reports.
My record proves the contrary.
But C. Everett Koop has not been a typical Surgeon General. He has been very much in the news, warning about the danger of aspirin to children, defending the Reagan administration's baby dough regulations on the treatment of deformed newborns, and issuing a controversial report on the dangers of passive smoking. But his most dramatic action came last fall when he issued the Surgeon General's report on AIDS.
The impact of AIDS on our society is and will continue to be devastating.
Just who is this Surgeon General who has become the Reagan administration's point man on AIDS? C. Everett Koop grew up in Brooklyn, a descendant of Dutch colonists and an only child. By age 6, he knew he wanted to become a surgeon. After college at Dartmouth and medical school at Cornell, he became, in 1948, surgeon-in-chief at the Philadelphia Children's Hospital, a job he held for 33 years. The separation of the Rodriguez Siamese twins in 1974 was just one of a string of Dr. Koop's accomplishments in Philadelphia.
My reasons against abortion are logical as well as morally based.
But it was his work outside the operating room that made Dr. Koop a controversial public figure. This anti-abortion film showing Dr. Koop surrounded by dolls representing aborted fetuses underscores his past image as a crusader for the pro-life movement.
We have killing quotas for whales and porpoises, but it is always open season on unborn babies. While we can appreciate this protection of our environment, do you wonder why I ask, whatever happened to the human race and to our sense of values?
Much of the opposition to Dr. Koop's appointment as Surgeon General in 1981 came from those who feared he would use the position to preach his pro-life views.
We want life! We want life! We want life!
However, just the opposite has happened. Dr. Koop has chosen not to use his post as a pulpit for anti-abortion views and has even suggested that pregnant women with AIDS deserve to be informed about abortion. All this has offended his former pro-life supporters, but Dr. Koop feels they should see his position on AIDS as also pro-life.
But why don't my pro-life friends see that my efforts today that they criticize are also pro-life? I am trying to protect the lives of unsuspecting, innocent young people right now who are going to step out with that marvelous optimism of youth who say, he's not talking to me, I'm immortal. I'm trying to protect their lives, just the way I was trying to protect the lives of the unborn. I see it as all one big picture. But they draw a line right there.
Dr. Koop's compassion for homosexuals who have been the primary victims of AIDS has also upset political conservatives. Dr. Koop says his critics want him to focus on the moral issues surrounding AIDS rather than the medical issues.
My critics would feel much better if I delivered an anti-homosexual sermon or an anti-drug abuse sermon or an anti-promiscuity sermon, but that is not the role of the Surgeon General. And remember that if I were to do any of those things, no one would believe me about what I said about the health issue of AIDS. And that is what I have to protect, not only for me as the surgeon, but for the Surgeon General as a role model. Now, the next thing I would say is I am the Surgeon General of everybody. White, black, young, old, male, female, moral, immoral, as you might see them, Christian, non-Christian, Jewish, non-Jewish, Roman Catholic, non-Roman Catholic. I can't just pick out groups of people out there and say, I'll take care of you.
Would you like to hear how Surgeon General Dr. C. Everett Koop says you can help protect yourself against AIDS?
The best protection against the infection right now, barring abstinence, is the use of a condom.
Dr. Koop's support of condoms for AIDS prevention has also aroused conservatives. Dr. Koop blames some of that on press emphasis, but sees other reasons.
It's also a function of people, my critics, the far political right, who I don't think really are interested in truth so much as they are in controversy, and they are more interested in what somebody else thinks I said than what I really said. And the thing that has been most discouraging to me when I've been face-to-face with my critics, and they've said, you said this, you said that, and I said, have you read my report? No, but you said this, you said that. That's terrible scholarship. One of the pro-life sheets here, from the American Life Lobby, has accused me of giving condoms to 8-year-olds. People who think that I do that don't understand me, but they also don't have much of an understanding of the size of an 8-year-old penis and the size of a condom. It's ridiculous.
The personal criticism has never gotten to you in a very personal way?
Of course it has. It's especially gotten to me now. I took the criticism from Christmas until now much more personally than I took the criticism when I came to Washington.
Because it came from your former friend.
I knew a lot of that stuff in 1981 was theater, you know.
And you don't think some of this today is even on the part of the political right?
Oh, I don't think it's theater now. No, I think they don't trust me, they don't understand me, and a lot of them really hate me. They say I'm a traitor. They've gone beyond it. They say I've kicked over the traces, I've gone over to the other side, whatever that means. I've given up the faith. Anybody that has carried water for conservative causes, and especially for pro-life people the way I have, would have to feel a little bit hurt, hard done to. I've gotten past the immediate hurt. I'm now angry.
And what does that mean?
I'm angry.
Not much you can do about it.
Not much you can do about it.
Getting back to the way in which AIDS represents this strange amalgam of moral thinking and scientific thinking. Do you think AIDS is an epidemic sent by God?
Now you've come back to that place where, as a public health officer, I'm not entitled to the luxury of an answer. I don't think we ever can prove that, so it's sort of a moot issue. But to try to address that as a public health officer, I'd lose a lot of public health credibility.
Do I dare ask you what you think privately?
If we weren't on television, maybe.
But for those in the religious movement who have made that suggestion, do you think it's appropriate for them to do?
Injustice bothers me terribly. I detest unfairness. And a lot of the way that people who are patients with AIDS are treated by other segments of the population, I think, is unfair and is unjust. And therefore, aside from the fact that I'm talking about public health, it bothers me. And I would just wish that people could understand that we have to have compassion for the sick, and we don't ask other people who are sick where they got it, or what they were doing when they got it, or why they felt that way. We deal with the sick people. We've got to treat AIDS patients that way.
Dr. Koop believes that we will make progress in treating AIDS victims, though he is pessimistic about an actual cure. He is also pessimistic about the timetable for a vaccine.
I've said I don't see a vaccine on the horizon, and probably we will not have a vaccine that is effective and available for general use before the end of the century. Now, we'll do things with vaccines. You see headlines in the paper, Zaire test vaccine next week, but that doesn't mean it's effective or it's available. It just means they're testing some part of it to see whether or not it does what they think it will do. So we've got a long way to go.
Putting it all together in a kind of a broad view, If we are to believe that AIDS will continue unabated until the year 2000, then the numbers are indeed staggering, overwhelming. Do you think, in fact, that scenario will play out, or that it will fall short of that there will be enough progress on some of these fronts by the year 2000 so that the numbers will not be as bad as you and others say they could be?
Well, I think we're at the crucial time to assess that situation right now. Only 4% of the people with AIDS today are heterosexual with no other high-risk behavior. Now, one of two things can happen. That 4% can burgeon into an epidemic just the way it happened in 1981 and 82 with the homosexual population. Or people can hear the message and change their lifestyle, and we will see the epidemic begin to be contained. We'll never know what did it. I don't care what did it as long as it happens.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Given the national concern about AIDS, it is surprising that President Reagan has spoken publicly only once on the subject, in Philadelphia last month. It has also been reported that the president has never spoken directly to Dr. Koop about AIDS.
Speaking of the president, your ultimate boss, it has been rumored that he has never once directly talked with you about the issue of AIDS. Is that true?
That's true, but he hasn't talked to me about anything else in health either. That's not what presidents do with surgeons general. That's why there's a Secretary of Health.
Has the president read your report?
I understand by reading the paper that he hasn't, but again, the president doesn't read reports like that. Can you imagine how many reports like that the president gets every day? He gets précis of things given to him by people that advise him on health.
On the other hand, I have to say, as a physician, given the magnitude of the AIDS problem, if there were one among many that I would choose to read, it might be that one.
Well, maybe he has. Maybe we don't know.
Are you aware of any attempts by the president or the White House to pull you back from your blunt and frank and widespread talk about AIDS?
No. Let me tell you that if that were the case, I would not be here. Because the day my wife and I drove from Philadelphia to Washington, we got about halfway here and I said, I want to tell you something I maybe should have told you before. If it ever comes to the point where I have something important to say about health and I'm told I can't, or I don't want to say something that I'm told I must, we're coming home. And that still holds.
Think they're glad to have you?
We'll see.
Are any of you afraid of someday a problem arising with AIDS?
Dr. Koop has also carried the message of AIDS to a much wider audience than just the homosexual community. In fact, it has been his advocacy of sex education in the schools that has especially infuriated his critics.
AIDS education must start at the lowest grade possible as part of any health or hygiene program. And there is no doubt that we need sex education in schools.
I do not understand why he keeps encouraging this open-ended sex education at every grade level.
In truth, Dr. Koop does not see proper sex education as open-ended, but rather as a very natural part of the classroom, beginning at an early age.
Well, let me tell you what one curriculum does that I think is really great. They take kids in the kindergarten where they have a play tunnel that they run through, and they call that the birth canal. And they have 5 kids that they select just before lunch on a given day, a mommy, a daddy, a baby, a doctor, and a nurse. Mommy and daddy put the baby in one end of the birth canal, and the doctor and the nurse take it out the other end. Doctor and the nurse call it a sex and give it a weight. Mommy and daddy give it a name. Then the kids go home and tell their parents what they did, and that's their opportunity to put anything that they would like to put in the way of their own ethical or moral or religious beliefs. It's a game. They do it every 3 or 4 weeks.
This is now kindergarten, first grade.
Kindergarten. These kids aren't frightened by that. They think it's a wonderful game. They move up into the 3rd grade, and now they're talking about organs that people have in their bodies, about stomachs and livers and so forth, and now they come to sexual organs, and they know there's such a thing as a vagina. Vagina. Well, that's the birth canal. It's not frightening. It's not mystifying. They move right on, forget that, and go on to what else they can learn.
Dr. Koop is a born-again Christian who was raised with conservative Baptist religion as a strong part of his early life. Now a Presbyterian, he practices his faith actively and regularly.
I don't have any real rituals. My wife and I read the Bible every morning. We have good theological discussions. On weekends, I am very frequently on the road. Many times, I'm so busy that my wife and I just take an hour and listen to one of my son's previous sermons and then talk it over for a while, and I get on with my work.
Even at age 70, Dr. Koop clearly is a man who still likes to work. He has always been that way. But what about the way in which he does his work?
A question that just occurred to me that I wouldn't want somebody to ask me, but I'm going to ask you.
No, I'm not that answer.
You certainly have that right. But looking back on all the public positions you have taken over the years, in your pre-Surgeon General days and now, is there any public position you have regretted, if not the content of it, the way in which you did it?
Oh, I told you I was honest, and I'll try to be. I think whenever a person of my particular psychological and emotional bent finally comes to the point where he says he has to speak out, he does it too vehemently, too shrilly, and too aggressively at first. I did that when I was trying to convince people that my Christian faith was the way to go. I'm sure I did it early on in abortion. I don't think I did it early on for AIDS. I'm older, wiser.
Tim, this is a man who is considered such a conservative. Now he can see abortion in certain cases. He's compassionate about homosexuality. Has he basically changed? And if so, why?
I don't think he's changed his intellectual convictions or his religious convictions, but I think he's widened them from his role as a scientist, as Surgeon General. I also think his wider exposure to human suffering as he has dealt with this issue of AIDS has changed his emotional perception about how he looks at the world. That's my guess, anyway.
You know, you said in this piece that he is 70 years old. It's either the greatest vitamins or his genes. He sure doesn't look it.
It is good Dutch genes.
Yeah. Such an interesting report, and we thank you for introducing a man so important in our lives.
Thank you.